I am actually kind of excited about this one. Steve and I have been talking and we've been discussing on the direction of narrative. And I wanted to introduce this session, this topic, where we kind of dive in a little bit more on the how-to things. Sometimes it's going to be a review. Somebody said something in one of our interviews, and we're going to bring that back out as far as a topic, really dive into what they said and some of the practices that they did. And then honestly, just to kind of share some of the experiences that we're dealing with in our own personal lives, because that's truly where we find that the narrative is being creative. That's the aspects of our lives that are coming together and being able to say, yeah, we're struggling. We walk through this every day. We still have parts of our lives that we're working on to be able to craft and create the narrative that we want to have moving forward. But we wanted to make it more about how do we actually operate in regards to our own personal lives. And so that's where we're headed. We're going to start doing these, actually. We talked about it. We're going to start doing these once a month, kind of incorporating that and allowing it to be a benefit or a complement to the stories that we're actually sharing of all of these different experiences of people's lives and how they're writing and crafting their stories. But I know sometimes we miss the how-to. And it's funny. All things come together to kind of generate this idea, this concept. And I've been recently kind of doing a little bit of research on the Stoic philosophy, coming back, and they kind of took it to an extreme where they had vows of silence and they only acted. And I don't want to go that far. However, there is a very, very true aspect and a very relevant aspect that without action, there's nothing that's ever going to get accomplished. If we don't implement some of the things that we're doing, nothing is ever actually going to happen. And we can sit here and we can talk about all kinds of great ideas and theories and strategies and all these things, but if we don't actually act on it, it's worthless. And so that's really what we're going to focus on. So over the next couple of months, we're going to see some different ones. And I just wanted to introduce this one as why it's so important. And Steve, feel free to add anything at any point in time when it comes to why we feel this is so critical to the next phase of where we're going into.
Yeah, I just think it's important. You know, you and I talk a lot, and the stories on the podcast are phenomenal. Getting to hear each person's narrative and their kind of life story or some highlights and different perspectives on their experience. But for me, and I think just talking through between us, we've had a lot of great conversations that we feel like would be beneficial. Of like, what are some of the themes? What are some of the things that are coming out of those individual stories that can be practically applied, that somebody can take and start to think about or start to take action on. If you're like me, like I can take in a ton of content, but I can't digest it all sometimes. So it's like, what can we take and put into practice, or at least hopefully have some conversation around adding value to that daily how to, like you said, what's a little bit the practical steps people can take to start to influence, start to craft their narrative. And I think that's important. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to these conversations and changing things up a little bit.
Yeah. I would also add one element to this whole piece of what is going on within our lives too, is we want to be able to discuss some of the depth of what we just kind of breeze over in some of our conversations. And so some of those things that we are doing in regards to the habits and the routines that people are creating, we also want to allow for a time where we can actually dive a little bit deeper into that. And what does that actually mean to my life? Because what I have found too is that something that is, and let's jump into the journaling aspect. And I've discussed this and we've discussed this, and this is one of the things that I do in regards to trying to keep my buckets full, my energy high. We talked a little bit off into the green screen, a little bit about soul tiredness, which I really want to dive into a little bit more. But one of the things that I have to do is I have to journal. Now, I started journaling with an absolute disdain and hated the idea, the concept of, I'm not going to sit there and journal every day. I mean, that's kind of what my mindset was originally. My perspective of journaling was, well, you got to sit down, you got to spend a certain amount of time, you got to write a number of words, a number of pages, you got to be very consistent with it. And I'm just like, that's not for me. However, in order to get started, I actually did follow a program, and I did it, and I committed to doing it for, this one happened to be for 30 days, where I answered questions, went through it. And I found within those 30 days how critical and how important that was. But then the second phase of that was, how do I now take this concept, this journaling concept, and make it applicable to my own life? so that it fits in with some of the things that I'm doing, my personality, the way I like to think, process things, put stuff down on paper. How does journaling as a concept actually work for me as Tim Croll?
Yeah, and you know, the journaling thing, I'm definitely not an expert on it yet. I know the value, and there have been short phases in my life where I've done journaling pretty consistently, not daily, but like, you know, 2 or 3 times a week at least. And one of the things that one, there's huge benefit. You're just convicting me that I need to get back into like writing stuff down and journaling and writing down those thoughts. I just do it in a different way. I just post it out on LinkedIn every day. One of the things that I like about that journaling or that, you know, daily diary activity, whatever you want to call it, is some of those times when I have purposely, you know, wrote down my thoughts and journaled for a couple months at a time, um, or even what I'm doing now in those brief snippets every day on LinkedIn. The value for me a lot of times is looking back. What what did I say 3 months ago? Or like, or what what was going on 6 months ago? And like, it gives you a lot of perspective, I think, looking back at some of the things that were going on or that you were writing down, that you were thinking about, that you were working on. And it's not so much so that discipline of doing it in the daily activity in the moment, you don't always see that benefit until after, you know, after the fact. So Tim, I know you are really diligent at the journaling discipline that you talked about. You've been doing it for a while. So I'm curious, what are the top three, you know, pieces of value, return on investment per se, on doing that daily activity? Like, what do you get out of it? What's the most valuable thing?
I think the biggest one is what you have already mentioned in regards to being able to look back. There is something to be said when you get to certain points in your life and you can actually pause and reflect on the journey that you've taken, the path that you've gone down, and see what it was like versus where you're at now. We become different people as we grow. And so that reflection is there. There's a really key element throughout this. There's a key element for us to learn from, and I use them. I call them totems. Back in olden time, they actually used to build stone monuments, or they would pile up a pile of rocks and just remember, or whether it was an altar, or there's all kinds of these types of things. And the intent for that was when the kids come along and say, "Hey, Dad, why is that pile of rocks there?" You can go back and you can tell the story. That's because this was a milestone in my life, or this was a crossing, or a victory, or this was a big change in my life. This is what it came from. So writing that stuff down and having a record of it is key, not just for you to be able to reflect back, but also for future generations. That way you can recall those stories as we get older, of whether it was a monumental victory that you were able to do, a task that you were able to overcome, a success that you did. And when I say success, it's not a business success. It's a success within your own personal life, or a development of your family, or things like that. That's where that's at. That's the first one. The second one is what I would classify as the ability to unplug. And the second component of that is we have and live in a world where we are constantly inundated with a massive amount of information, audio, input, and our adrenaline is constantly being spiked. And whether that is through, I mean, we're in an election year, for Pete's sake. I mean, with the election, we're going to see all these kinds of drama, all this stuff that's going to kick up a whole bunch of different pieces and part that are going to get our adrenaline pumping. Doesn't matter what side, where you're at, doesn't matter. You're going to hear news, and the adrenaline is going to be constantly kicking. Sometimes it's work where you have a project due, whatever. The ability to journal is the ability to be able to unplug that and start to get some of that adrenaline to leave your system, and that calming aspect of being able to just kind of come back to center. And then the third thing is, in that, this is a separate one, but it's related. In that calming, it gives me the ability to actually think a little bit about what is going on. And it allows me to slow down and say, okay, I made this decision. Is this the right decision? Is there something else that I need to consider? Or is there some other direction or perspective that I need to consider within this decision? And so those are, I would say, the top three things. There's other things that are there that are definitely valuable, but those would be the top three things that I have found through the journaling aspect that have given me a lot of clarity, a lot of confidence, a lot of self-awareness in the direction and path that we are actually taking. So.
Yeah, I think that's huge. That second one too, that ability to unplug, that it just doesn't happen. I mean,
Yeah.
we're you know just programmed to be always on. I mean, I was at a job 10 years ago that like that they specifically told me like you're always on. Doesn't matter if you're working or not. You're expect like it's been drilled into us, I think, for decades now that since we have smartphones, a lot of that culture is just built around you're always supposed to be uh, responsive. You're always supposed to be watching. You're also all the notifications that pop up. So I think what you're saying is really much needed. That moment of solitude, or putting yourself into a place where you can think, because like you said, that ties together. You're
Yeah.
unplugging for a purpose of thinking a little deeper, reflecting, probably um, easier to have gratitude, I think, or proper perspective on, hey, here's what's really going on. What am I thankful for? What am I working on? All those different things. You can't really get there. I guess this is a question for you. Can you get there without like taking that step back and having a place of solitude to actually do that kind of
I,
work and
I don't
thought?
believe that you, well, and this ties in with some of the other things that we are going towards, right? And I think this is a great transition to talk about the development of community. There is two components of that. One is the solitude to be able to the unplugging, and then the second part of it is to actually have somebody that's willing to give you a different perspective, somebody that's willing to challenge your thoughts and say, "Is that really how you think?" and making you think through that critically. We've lost some of that ability within our society, and in regards to the development of the community, I know we've talked about this with several of our interviews and several of the stories, is how sometimes just a simple word would change your perspective. I remember back with JD when he was going through some of his challenges, he said a stranger at a grocery store would just mention something and instantly it would change his perspective. Tammy, another one that we had on, is very empathetic and has that ability to be able to sense on people's emotions. And just a few small words with her to another person, she could totally see the shift in their perspective. And we can't underestimate how powerful our community is. But to get in that state of gratitude or getting to that component, I think it requires two elements. One is, yes, you have to have that reflective time. But two is the ability to have somebody else challenge the perspective that you're looking through. We all look through rose-colored glasses. We all have one position of life and see how things are working, but we don't all we can't always break that. We can't always come out of that. So it's really important to be able to have those two pieces that are going together. And that's why we are creating the Discord channel.
Yeah, that's actually a good time to mention that. Like, it's important, that community building, that conversation. So, if people aren't aware, we've got a new Discord community that you can jump in, get involved in, have deeper conversations. Sometimes, over the content of the podcast that week, or different discussion questions, or just kind of sharing that journey. Um, but what you said, Tim, is huge. I think the solitude, if I'm kind of summarizing it the way I'm understanding, the solitude is necessary so that you can properly understand and communicate what your thoughts are on any given thing, a subject, a debate, your own life, your own story, whatever. And then the next step in that is actually sharing that with somebody and having a real conversation in community and getting some other perspectives from it. Because I think what happens to me, what happens to a lot of us probably, is we get so much information, and you either get really fired up about something and you just default to like, oh, this, like your brain is like, okay, I'm gonna put it in that box. I'm on this side of this story. I'm on this side of whatever, politics, like you said, or other things. You kind of shortcut to like, I don't have time to actually listen and consume all of these different points or debates. I'm just gonna shortcut to, okay, this is where I stand on that thing. Or I'm guilty of this. Like, I just don't care. I don't care anymore. It's all fake news, like whatever, or it's all a bunch of content coming at me. Um, I don't watch the news. Like my parents watch the evening news like every day of their lives, I think, growing up and those type of things. I don't purposely watch the news or look for it in a newspaper or anything like that because I've kind of checked out on some of those things, no, good or bad. But I think the same thing kind of applies in just life in general and how you're how you're either letting life impact your story and kind of checking out, or you're being purposeful of like what where did I come from, where am I going, what do I want to achieve, and purposely crafting that story, and then having building a community around you of like-minded people that can actually speak into that and give you some constructive feedback. I just think it's super rare.
Well, it is rare because it's hard. And anything that's hard to do, also, it's very, very beneficial, but it is difficult. And so you have to make it a priority. You have to be
Yeah.
purposeful in the action and the thing that you're trying to accomplish. And therefore, because of the many, many demands of things that are on our life, if we don't make it a priority, then it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this before, is you are going to become like those that you're hanging around with. And frankly, sometimes as you grow, you will not be able to hang around with the same kind of people. You have to continue to elevate those that you're hanging around with. Now, I'm of the opinion I want to help everybody grow with me. I want to take everybody along with me on the journey. However, I also know that's an impossibility. Not everybody doesn't want to grow. People like their comfort. They like their little boxes and they do not want to move on or grow through an experience, right? So that definitely is a challenge. But as we are moving forward and looking at that, you have to purpose and say, I am looking for this type of an individual. Somebody that's going to be honest with me, somebody that's going to share with me when they see me going down a track or talking about something that is a wrong perspective. And sometimes it's just a gentle nudge of saying, have you thought about it from this angle? Have you thought about it from a different perspective? Sometimes it's maybe a little bit more. Sometimes, and you and I have done this too, is sometimes it's just listening because there's nothing that we can do. I mean, it's a situation that's completely out of both of our control. There's nothing that can be done. So when we're looking at community, I think, again, it comes down to one, you have to set it as a priority. Two, you have to be very purposeful in those that you're hanging around with. But then three is now the communication aspect of, are you, and this has to be a two-way street, are you actually also communicating and giving feedback when somebody asks? Or are you even able to? Our generation does not ask for help. We do not ask. We do not. And that's again part of the reason why we started Narrative, is because we found how many people were carrying the weight of the world and thinking that they were alone. People just don't ask for help. So in this community, are you willing to be able to be in a transparent, authentic place that says, "Hey, I need help in this. Like I'm struggling. Being open and honest." Now that can be painful. I mean, sometimes you get burnt. I'll be honest with you. Sometimes it happens, but other times it's where frankly, it's where the healing has to happen. There's no other way to be able to do that.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I also think there's some principles, just like you said, on journaling. Like if you're building a community of value, the discipline itself might be investing in others first. Just like you said, you write down every day, like the journaling aspect, and then you get a lot of value when you look back or like later. Being part of the community might be 100% giving right away. You know what I mean? You might be investing, listening, building relationships, um, because one, you hopefully you care about those people that you're building community with, but in the future, uh, you have to cash. You're going to cash that in, I guess is what I'm saying. They're going to reciprocate, but at the beginning, sometimes you're the person I think investing and listening and giving feedback and listening to that story. And it could go both ways, but people enter this community at different stages. Somebody really needs that outside perspective right away, and they needs help right away. Um, the other person might be, just willing to listen and contribute and say, hey, you said this is your story that you're trying to tell. Sometimes it's not like guidance or advice or anything. It's just yesterday you said you wanted to do this. Now you're going this direction. what changed. And maybe it's a purposeful change, and maybe it's a good change, maybe it's not. It's just somebody that's actually listening, though. The balance to that is the people that are investing are getting great rewards out of that because they value the, like basically investing in others and seeing others grow. Um, my message to the other side of that is like nobody's got an easy life forever, and everybody's going to need that community. So just because you don't need it today or like this year, next year, maybe it's 3 years from now, but you did these investments in other people, and suddenly you've got a bunch of people that have your back, that you've invested in, that you've grown to know and trust, and then when you need that community, you've got something to lean on as well. So I mean, it's just a myth that anybody, like, we always compare to other people, right? And think everybody's got it made. This looks great. They got the perfect marriage, the perfect job, the perfect everything. And I've just come to know like everybody's screwed up. It doesn't matter. So if it looks great, that just means, you know, some either they're really good at hiding it, or something hasn't happened yet, and it will, because it always does. So yeah, we don't see the work behind the the successful relationship, the successful business, the successful career, whatever. You never show that full measure of the amount of, like you said, pain and work that went into making those things successful. Um, or you rarely see it. That's what I would say. Um, so I guess I wanted to circle back to one other thing that you started with, Tim, because I think it's a very interesting concept, and just kind of shifting gears back towards the beginning. So you talked about this idea of like soul weariness or soul tiredness. Uh, what do you mean by that?
All right.
Yeah.
So I had a conversation with my mentor, and he said something that was pretty much just stopped me in my tracks. And that was, he said, it's really fun to see what you're building out of the ashes of what has happened over the last 20, 30 years. And I mean, basically, I share everything with him, and some of the challenges, the greater challenges, the emotional depth and hurt, and some of the pain that came out of some of the things that experiences and challenges I had in my childhood. And there was just a whole ton of things, lawsuits, and I could just name them down. There's just a lot of things. And when he said that, it really made me stop and look back. And that was part of the reflective aspect of, wow, we have come a long way. There is a lot of changes. There's a lot of differences. There's a lot of cool things that we're building, everything from Lego events and touching literally thousands and thousands of people through Lego events to this narrative project that we're working on to be able to impact many different people's lives, and then doing Lego workshops and impacting. All of these things kind of came together to hit me. And that soul tiredness was just the fact of, I wasn't sure if I could keep going. Like, I wasn't sure if I could, if I had the energy to mount another or summit another mountain, to be able to say, yeah, I want to take on another project. And as I kind of went through that, I realized, yeah, I do have the energy. I do have that, because it's providing and giving me more of an incentive. But yet I still had to deal with this aspect of, man, I'm just tired. I'm just really, really tired. But again, it wasn't a physical. It was just something that you kind of feel deep in your soul. And so that's the part of that. And I guess I'm still currently working through it. So I don't have all of the answers. I don't have like, oh yeah, this is great, this is fine. But as I work through this aspect, I've had not just you help and talk, and mentor, and then I have several other friends that I kind of brought this up. And um, it's interesting as I open up about this, how many people come alongside and not make fun of you or not say like, that's just stupid, suck it up. You know, they're not saying that. There's just like, dude, I get it. I've been there. I feel it. And it's encouraging to see how many people are willing to walk alongside you through some of those things, rather than just kind of like, well, you'll get over it, it'll be fine in a little bit. No, they're like, dude, I understand. It's like, you have some things that you're dealing with. You've got big projects. You're feeling a little bit of the overwhelm of how much you have to get done. We'll get through it together. I'm here for you. If you want to talk, just call. And that's really, truly the responses that I've been getting. And I believe that that's coming out of this fact of building community, and how you and I have been very
Yeah.
purposeful in our meeting, and how we've actually started looking at how do we develop people in and around the community. And I find that so satisfying in a way that not like hunger satisfies. It's just how do you put into words something that you feel deep in your soul? It's a gut feeling that you can't really express. And I'm struggling with words here to express how satisfying it is, but it's something that until you experience it, you really can't understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, yeah, I can definitely relate though to the soul weariness that you're talking about, and I've certainly been through those times myself. I think everyone has. I recently read a book. It's called the Ruthless Elimination of Hurry,
Mm.
and the author talks about the same thing. Like we're so busy, we're so always the next thing. We're all these notifications, like you're talking about, and expectations that we put on ourselves for even really good things, like you said, different things we have going on, we're trying to accomplish, that that we don't give our soul enough time to catch up with our body and our mind, basically. So everything's triggering so fast that
Yep.
you know we don't slow down enough, right? And we don't make those purposeful times of solitude, or take that time away for your soul to catch up with your body. I mean, it can sound crazy to me. I heard that, I was like 100%.
That's
Yeah,
it.
I've been there, done that, still there, and so I think the two things that I took out of that book and our conversations and what you're talking about today is that balance of taking the time for yourself so you can slow down and let your soul catch up to the craziness of not just being bombarded by the craziness of life, but then also having that community around you. Like those are they, they go together. They sound opposite, solitude and community, but they actually go hand in hand together. There's something about real community. Like there's people can be very fake, and we I think pretty much everyone can spot that now. But if you have real community and real friends and allies and people that understand and want to understand your story and what your life's about, that's that's huge, and it doesn't happen overnight, like you said. Like the value in that is the building of that. I think it's the process of getting there. It's not just, oh, I met with some friends and it was great and it's one time thing. It's the consistency. It's the frequent communication and the involvement that they get to see how you've evolved over months, years, whatever the time frame is. And I think it just keeps getting like deeper and more valuable the longer that community exists. In the beginning, there's obviously some value and it continues to grow, but when you start talking years or decades, I know friends of ours that have been like had lifelong friends for like 3-4 decades now, and I like you talk to them, they get immense value from that community that they've done over a very long period of time. And I think it probably just gets better and better. Yeah.
Let's head down and kind of wind this thing up in regards to the conversation of all of the things that we've talked about throughout this last couple of minutes. We kind of breezed over journaling, we breezed over community, we breezed over, like, we went over a lot of these things. Going back to the Discord channel, we're going to put a link in our notes so that way you guys, everybody that's listening, you can actually get in touch with us and be able to do that. If you have questions about any one of these topics, that's what the Discord channel is for. We want to dive deeper into this. We want to be able to say, hey, I practice journaling, but I don't know how to do it, so I need to ask some questions about journaling. Or I practice trying to build a community and it keeps falling apart. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Let's have a conversation about that. Let's have these deeper conversations on the how-tos within the discourse, so that way we can kind of practice what we're actually talking. We can act on what it is that we're discussing here, because then that's where we can have the balance of our own time versus the ability to have the community component tie together. But that's where we want you to connect with us, ask the questions, and be part of that conversation for not only the betterment of you, but the betterment of the community. And that's part of the investing in the serving.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited about that. Obviously, it's brand new. I think there's a need. We're looking forward to building that community. So I hope people jump in and get involved. I mean, I really do. And somebody might say, well, I'm not that familiar with Discord or that platform. Well, hey, it's a little bit of work. I don't care.
Yeah, it's
Uh, you know,
yeah.
nothing's perfect, but we selected that platform as a good way to interact and start to build a community that can ask and answer these questions together. So yeah, I hope people jump in and get engaged there. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, and so let me ask you one more question, Steve, before this is the end of it. You know, and we know, and we've talked about this. We always ask for people that are willing to tell and talk their story. But here's what I want to ask you: why should somebody share their story, their journey, with narrative or with this community?
Uh, that's a great question. I think everyone's sharing their story one way or another, right? So they either share it one on one, just with the people around them, or possibly with their immediate family or their immediate community. To have the opportunity to share your story, with the narrative podcast, it amplifies that message. And I believe people have, really valuable stories, and the things that they went through in their lives and how they handle them and how they change and adapt have a lot of value. So narrative gives a platform that they can amplify that message and really benefit more people. That's bottom line why I think somebody should tell their story on narrative. And I also think not everyone needs to jump on and be a podcast guest, but you can start to tell your story within the Discord community, within, putting some comments on there, asking questions, getting involved in other people's, lives, or helping out that way. Like, the answer isn't just be a podcast guest necessarily. Happy to entertain those that want to be on the podcast, but there's other ways to get involved. It's just a way to amplify that message, and I think people have good stories that are going to influence other people.
Absolutely, and not just influence, but impact. And I think that impact is
Yeah.
greater and the bigger key, because that's what changes lives. That's what is that investing in back into somebody else. And I think the reason why you should share your story with narrative is, one, it gives you the ability, like you just said, to amplify the entire story out into other people's lives. Two, it gives the ability to be able to say, yeah, I'm not the only one that's going through this. And other people now come along and resonate with your story. And then that's when we're able to actually have, again, a greater impact in our community. So I love the fact that you also said, one of the reasons that you should share your story is maybe you're not sharing your story on a podcast and you're not comfortable with actually doing an interview, but you can share pieces of your story through the Discord. When people are saying, hey, I'm struggling with XYZ, you can come alongside and say, hey, look, I went through that. That was a challenge that I faced, and now I can actually walk with you as you go through that challenge. So I'm excited where this is going to go to. I know it's a challenge sometimes for us to be able to communicate the depth of our passion for it. Hopefully it comes through in our voices and it comes through in what we're doing. But we want you guys and everyone that's listening to come along and be with us, walk this journey together. And again, continue to share your story, because your stories are just as important. Your stories are going to what makes narrative what it is. And all of those have value, all of those have meaning, and all of those can have impact.
Perfect.